Hi everyone, hope you're keeping safe and taking the absolutely necessary precautions. And today I'm actually going to change the topic a little bit and talk about coronavirus, but in the context of the previous videos that I've done on this channel. As I speak on July the 27th, 2020, there have apparently been 653,000 deaths worldwide, and there are currently 16,456,000 cases. The latest euphemism for people all over the world who have limited or perhaps no access to services which some of us, at least in the rich West, take for granted, is underserved. Whole communities, whole nations are deprived, and this, I believe, sadly, because of COVID-19, is going to get worse. Karl Marx believed that capitalism is foredoomed to collapse. It's a little early to say whether he was right or not, but he did not, at the time he was writing, he could not foresee the resilience with which capitalism would fight back. The capitalist system is an enormously flexible one, and such amenities as easy credit means that virtually everyone could at least hope to get ahead under a capitalist system, especially when rules and regulations came in limiting the working day, guaranteeing holidays, minimum salaries and so forth. Everybody felt, or could feel, that once they had a foot on the ladder they could climb up and perhaps become mini capitalists themselves. This is the basis of the American dream, but something that's certainly not limited just to the United States. Now, in earlier videos, I've tried to suggest that the present system is in many ways contradictory, and in present circumstances we are, I believe, going to see the enormous social cost that these contradictions entail. I could stand as an example myself. During lockdown, my wife Kathy and I had to close our bar restaurant. We survived because friends and family, I won't embarrass them by naming them, but friends and family rallied around, and immediate financial demands on the business and on our shrinking bank account were eased by government intervention. Some people, those on fixed incomes, for example, did quite well out of quarantine, in fact saved money, but many came under enormous pressure, financial, psychological. The self-employed, for example, no income, costs still to pay. Those who were working in sectors which basically froze, such as tourism. It's by no means certain how many of these people will actually get their jobs back. Here in Spain, although fortunately the number of deaths has declined considerably, it seems that the virus is on its way back. When we reopened a couple of months ago now, business was initially better than we expected, as unspent cash was spent on social activities with friends, of which people had felt deprived for the period of the lockdown. But personally, I don't think we should have reopened at all. In our case we had to, no option. I'm sure that many businesses in the village feel exactly the same as I do, that we did reopen too soon. But we needed the money. But with COVID on the rise again in Spain, we're now in a very delicate situation indeed. However, the government here, and in most countries, is in a bind, because it's trying to do two things at once, and these two things are, in effect, mutually exclusive. The government has a fundamental duty to protect the population, but in order to be able to adequately do so, it needs to reopen the economy and get cash moving through the system again. It's impossible to do both. And the economy as we know it might well be damaged beyond repair. Let's take the small retailer as an example. She will find it very difficult to survive as people switch more and more to online shopping. And many people, I believe, will be somewhat reluctant to spend on discretionary items because they are worried about what's around the corner. The new car that they were going to buy, well, that can wait a year. Perhaps this year we won't have a holiday after all. We don't know if it's safe to travel. We don't know if we go somewhere we'll be able to get back. We don't know if we go to Portugal, perhaps we'll have to quarantine in 2 weeks' time. People are uncertain, and people are going to hold on to their money. This necessarily will entail, obviously, a rise in unemployment, which in turn means a rise in costs, social costs, for the government. The only weapon in the government, in any government's armoury here, I think, is to raise taxes. There are various ways that this can be done, but any increase in taxes will further slow spending. People in debt will begin to sell such things as cars, flats and businesses, which will, I believe, as they become desperate to sell, leave them vulnerable to people who are quite simply taking advantage of other people's desperation. As jobs and the possibility of getting a job disappear, social inequality will rise. It may be possible to counter this by introducing a guaranteed minimum income, but this will have to be paid for somehow. And without jobs, how do we find something meaningful for people to do? we are now reaching a position where we're going to have a major rethink. Now, the idea of social capital lacks an absolutely clear definition, but basically it relates to our ability to work together to solve complex problems. Now, I've suggested in the previous video about Dunbar numbers that there are limits to empathy. There are ways to encourage people to work in larger groups, but to do this we really need a clear idea of where we're going, what the general effects of this virus will be on society, taking as its base first the economic effects, and how we are going to counter that. And this will also, I think, necessarily lead differing countries or groups of countries to try and seek problems amongst themselves. And a danger then arises that the more disadvantaged countries will simply be left to their own resources. This, I strongly believe, is something we have to avoid at all costs. I would welcome people's thoughts on what they think the short and longer term effects of the virus will be. Please do feel free to leave any comment that you wish. And I'll be changing the topic next time. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Stay safe.